the outstanding contributions of African Americans here to our great nation and our city. You know, this year's theme is no exception. A Cry to Freedom serves as a tribute to the role of African Americans in our armed forces during the Civil War period, where most folks really have this imagery of African Americans during that period being in servitude. But clearly, we can depict here that that was not the case. You know, we have the honor of celebrating the history of these great men and women who sacrificed their lives for a call to service to our founding fathers, so that the term, all men are created equal, has been brought to reality. You know, we're really grateful for the work that our historical folks who are here, such as Samuel and John Ford, which John's going to keynote and really give us, you know, the power behind how we present this information here today. We really thank these historians who took on the task of documenting this history and gave us the chance to understand and learn about our great past. I would also say this evening that we recognize two men, and when I say recognize, you also, let me just take you back a bit. When you see films and depictions of films and historic acts of courage, you see some of these and you say, wow, does that really happen on a battlefield if you haven't been in service before? And tonight we are going to recognize two men who answered this call and who actually carried out these outstanding acts of virtue and courage, who were Medal of Honor winners. James Bronson, a former slave, an Indiana County resident, 1st Sergeant D Company, 5th U.S. Colored Troops, who took command of his company after all of the officers, and how many movies have you seen where all of the officers have been killed and one person steps to the fore and takes control of the situation? That is not fiction. This man won the Medal of Honor for really accomplishing the same feat. Not only was all of his officers killed and wounded, he gallantly led his troops in the face of grave danger. And so we offer up a tribute to James Bronson this evening. In addition to James Bronson, we have Alexander Kelly, 1st Sergeant F Company, 6th U.S. Colored Troops, who was also born in Indiana County, but resided in Pittsburgh. Under great bombardment, Sergeant Kelly bravely seized the colors, and how many times have we seen that depicted in film? Seized the colors which had fallen near the enemy lines, raised them, and rallied the men at a time of great confusion and in a place of imminent danger. These two men are just a glimpse of the countless tales of heroic feats and other activities by African American soldiers who are depicted here this evening in the lobby. Recently, at Pittsburgh's Allegheny Cemetery, more than 100 Civil War-era African American soldiers were honored by local citizens, historians, and veterans. Many of these men who were laid to rest called Pittsburgh their home. In the past, these fallen heroes were met with harsh discrimination, but today we honor the sacrifice that they made for their great nation, and we do recognize them as true Pittsburgh heroes. Tonight, we will hear from those who bring the past to us as we remember the sacrifices of our ancestors. I encourage you all, your families, your friends, your associates, your co-workers, I encourage you all to take advantage of this information that we present each year for the past nearly 20 years with different topics. And once again, we are proud that we research, we authenticate, and we present in this manner. And so in closing, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the very special City Park staff.
I began working part-time at the Heinz History Center following his passion for history. He also became the educational specialist at the Heinz History Center. At the conclusion of a very successful career, Mr. Ford embraced his true passion of 48 years, that is African American artifacts and history.
Celebrate the Civil War, and I know that this theme, Cry for Freedom, is special to me. And it's special because so many of our African brothers were to fight in the Civil War. And I'll tell you a little bit of history about that if I may. They could not fight because of laws that were on the books. They could not fight until 1863. And of course that occurred after Abraham Lincoln had the Emancipation Proclamation enacted. And after counsel with Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth, two of our past heroes, he decided that Africans could indeed fight and join the Union Army and fight for the freedom of the North. But it must be understood that Africans also were fighting for their own freedom. Africans felt that if they were to fight in the Civil War, they would have liberty and they would have justice and they would indeed be free. In 1863, they did indeed fight. Numbers. Between 185,000 and 200,000 Africans fought in the Civil War. I like to use the number of 189,000. That seems to be the most accurate. And we had about 8,900 from Pennsylvania. And from this area, we had over 500 Africans that would fight in the Civil War. And they fought in famous battles. And some of you might notice the big Men of Color sign on the wall, and it says to join the fight for freedom and show valor and heroism. And it talks about the battles of Port Hudson and Milliken's Bend. And I'm sure all of you have seen the story Glory, the movie Glory. And it talks about Fort Wagner. So there were so many famous battles that Africans would fight, and indeed they would help secure victory for the North. And the Civil War was over in 1865. So now we are celebrating the 150-year anniversary of that Civil War. And I would like to add something on a personal note. May I do that? Okay. I just want your permission. The Civil War was over in 1865. But I want you to know that it took 100 years, 4 to 5 generations, for downtown Pittsburgh to hire a black man in corporate America. And that black man was me. In 1965, I worked for a company called Harbison and Walker Refractories Company. And I was the first black man hired by Harbison and Walker Refractories Company. That's not good. 100 years after the Civil War, before we could join corporate America. And throughout my life, and I appreciate the resume that was read, it kind of makes me feel old, but that's okay, because I am. My history goes way back, and it has always been, of course, in the city of Pittsburgh. I was asked to talk a little bit about my collecting, and I will tell you a story that's true. Again, it's on a personal basis, but it started back in the 5th grade when I was at Belmar Elementary School in Homewood. And my teacher was asking us what we wanted to be when we grew up. And I told her I wanted to be an architect. And she said, John, you might want to think of something else. You can't be an architect because you're a Negro. And I went home and asked my mother what a Negro was. And she got mad and she said, you're not a Negro, you're colored. You tell that teacher you're colored. And I never knew what color it was. But that started me to embark on the search for true African history. And as I went through high school, and certainly the period after high school, we were all pretty much civil rights activists in the late 60s. And Nate Smith and Bowie Hayden, we had to march on the U.S. Steel Building in, I believe that was 69. But we went through, of course, the assassinations of Martin Luther King and John and Robert Kennedy and Malcolm X. It was a very, very tough time period. But that made me study, and not only study, I wanted to prove everything that I might say. Because as I speak, I want to be able to say, I can prove this because we have the original documentation. So I set out to purchase documents and artifacts to the extent that sometimes my light bill had to wait and my gas bill had to wait until I could purchase the documents that would confirm our history. So you see some of those documents on the wall, and I'm very proud to say that none of the items are on loan. They don't have a loan associated with them. I have no grants. I don't accept grants because when I make a display, I want to do it my way or I won't do it. I have to tell the truth. So, I hope all of you have an opportunity to look at the primary source material that's available. And I might be going over my time. Am I going over my time? I'm fine? Okay. You will also notice some of the exhibit artifacts at Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall and Museum. And I worked there part-time. When I retired from the Heinz History Center in 2007, Soldiers and Sailors contacted me to be a consultant. And I felt good about that. So I've been with Soldiers and Sailors as a consultant and historian since 2007. And I knew that everything would be okay at the Heinz History Center since I was the only black director there. I knew it would be okay because a colleague of mine, Sam Black, I don't know where Sam is, Sam Black, I knew everything would be okay because Sam Black was coming. He is now the curator for African American collections. But what I want to point out before I get back into history if I have time is that it has been too long that we are still talking about the first. I don't want to be the first black man to work at Harbison Walker Refractories Company anymore. When I was at Mellon Bank, I was the first black man to supervise. That was back in 1970. And then in 1972, I was the first black man to travel 3 states for Mellon Bank. And then I was the first black man to be in the medical surgical division at Park Davis and Company. Same thing with 3M. At the History Center, I was their first black director. As Soldiers and Sailors, I'm the first black historian and consultant. It has been too long since the Civil War for us to continue to say that we are the first. So as others have paved their way for me, I want to pave the way for those youngsters who are coming, certainly following those of us who now gain the spotlight on occasions. And I appreciate the fact that Pittsburgh, my home, it is known as, what did we just recently hear it called? The most livable city. Pittsburgh, right? The most livable city. The city of great real estate investments. I want that to be throughout the city of Pittsburgh. And I would like to see Pittsburgh known as the city of education. And not just because of Carnegie Mellon and Duquesne and the University of Pittsburgh, etc. I would like our elementary schools and our high schools to be on par with the best in this country. We can't do anything without our children. And I want to see our children take my place. And that would make me very happy. You will see the roses bloom at my gravesite if that does indeed happen. So, we celebrate the 150-year anniversary of the Civil War. I think I did mention 189,000 Africans fought in the Civil War. And do note that I say Africans because they were Africans even though they were mixed genetically. And do note that when my teacher in 5th grade said they were Negroes, they were Africans from many different countries. They were Yoruba, or they were Igbo, or they were Ashanti, or they were Dan, or they were Congo, and they were all mixed together on that enslavement ship, and they were called Negroes. So, as we emerged from the Civil War, we emerged with the idea of freedom, but we had absolutely no idea as to what our culture was or what our history was. We had to find that out independently. We had to find that out for ourselves.